Imagine reaching old age without the security of a pension, without properties that generate income, and without a solid family network to support you. How would you face a future where every day is a struggle for dignity and peace of mind? In a system where support for the elderly is often fragile, this reality can be frightening. But what would you do if you knew that there were alternatives capable of guaranteeing a dignified and carefree life, even in the face of these uncertainties? Let's discover together how to transform these challenges into opportunities for a full and serene old age. Before discovering solutions that can change your future, think. This content can help many others. If you believe in a dignified old age for everyone, leave your like. Subscribe to Wise and Transformative Buddhism, and together, let's make a difference. Let's get started. My story begins in a small rural town where I spent most of my life. This town, with its dirt roads and modest homes, was a place where time seemed to move differently at a slower, more measured pace. Life here was simple and marked by a daily routine of hard work, but there was also an inherent beauty in that simplicity. Days were filled with tasks that, while exhausting, brought with them a sense of purpose and belonging. I grew up in a community where everyone knew everyone else. Families were close-knit, and relationships were forged over the years, strengthened by a shared history of struggles and achievements. In this community, life was a sequence of tasks and responsibilities, but also of rewarding moments of togetherness and mutual support. Harvest festivals, religious celebrations, shared dinners on special occasions. All of these contributed to a deep sense of connection and solidarity. My husband, Li Wei, was a dedicated worker at a local construction site. He was known for his impeccable work ethic and his ability to transform raw materials into solid, safe structures. For more than 2 decades, he was the financial backbone of our family, a man whose strength and determination provided us with the security we needed. His dedication to his work and to providing for our family was unwavering. He would wake up before dawn, quickly get ready, and head out for a day of hard work. When he returned in the evening, exhausted and covered in dust, he would always find a smile for us, his children, and a kind word for me. However, fate played a cruel trick on us when, on a rainy, gloomy day, Li Wei suffered a tragic accident at work. It was a rainy morning when the accident happened. Gray clouds covered the sky, and a light drizzle fell incessantly, making the ground at the construction site slippery and dangerous. Li Wei was performing a particularly dangerous task on the construction site when a safety error resulted in a collapse. The building collapsed, and Li Wei did not survive. The news of his death came to me like a bolt of lightning on a bright day, a blow that left me devastated, unable to understand how life could be so cruel and unforgiving. The loss was devastating, and the grief of his departure left a deep void in our lives. The pain of losing the man I had built a life with, the father of my children, was unbearable. The house, which had once been filled with the sound of his voice, his laughter, and his stories, now felt cold and desolate. The nights became long and lonely, and the future, which had once seemed promising with Li Wei by his side, was now shrouded in a fog of uncertainty and fear. After the accident, the construction site manager, Mr. Zhang, approached me with an offer of compensation of $300,000. He explained that this was the maximum amount the company could offer due to the financial difficulties it was facing. The company was struggling to stay afloat, and the delays in paying workers' salaries were clear evidence of its financial crisis. Mr. Zhang insisted that even if I filed a lawsuit against the company, I would not be able to get more than the amount offered, as the funds were exhausted. In a state of desperation and with few other options, I accepted the $300,000 and signed a consent form. The document stated that I would not seek any further compensation and considered the case closed. The loss of Li Wei was a heavy blow to our family, and financial compensation seemed to be the only way to provide some security for the future. However, that money, which seemed like a lot at the time, soon proved insufficient to fill the void left by Li Wei's absence, both emotionally and financially. At that moment, I realized that my life had changed irreversibly. With the loss of Li Wei, the responsibility of taking care of our family and securing our future fell entirely on me. I knew that I could not afford to grieve indefinitely. I had to be strong for myself and my children and find a way to survive and move forward. I decided that, despite the adversities, I would not let myself be defeated. Li Wei had always been an example of strength and determination, and that was what I needed to channel to face this new reality. With the compensation money, I made the difficult decision to sell our house and move to a smaller place where expenses would be more affordable. At the same time, I began to think of ways to secure a stable income that could support our family in the long term. At that time, our son, Jian, was 18 years old and about to graduate from high school. He had worked hard to prepare for the college entrance exams, but the results were not as expected. He was unable to get into a college, which was an additional blow to our already shaken family. The frustration he felt was enormous, and I could see the weight of disappointment in his eyes. Faced with financial pressure and the desperate situation, Jian expressed his desire to seek opportunities in the big city, hoping to find a way to turn our situation around. Jian was determined to find a job in the city and contribute in some way to improving our financial situation. The idea that he could have a better future outside of the small rural town brought me some relief, and I agreed with his decision. I knew he was desperate to help, and it showed how mature and responsible he was becoming. I gave Jian $10,000 for emergencies, instructing him to use the money wisely and take care of himself. I reinforced to him the importance of keeping his feet on the ground, reminding him of the challenges that awaited him in the big city. He moved to the city and got a job as an auto mechanic. The starting salary was $3,000 a month, and Jian promised that with time and experience, his salary could increase. I was hopeful that Jian could build a better life for himself and somehow help our family. However, promises of a better future do not always come true in the ways we imagine. The first few months in the city were tough for Jian. He faced the harsh reality of living in an unfamiliar environment, far from the comfort and support of his family. The expenses were high, and the cost of living in the city forced him to tighten his belt more than he had anticipated. Not long after Jian settled in the city, he called me asking if I could use some of his severance money to help him buy a house. He argued that the rent he was paying was too high and that it would be more advantageous to buy his own place instead of continuing to pay rent. Although I had my reservations about spending the severance money, Jian assured me that once his financial situation improved, he would support me and take me to live with him in the city. I saw the purchase of the house as an opportunity for Jian to solidify his independence while also ensuring future stability for our family. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to leave a like. This helps us continue to bring you inspiring stories. Let's go back to the story. I trusted Jian's word and transferred the remaining $290,000 so that he could buy a house. Jian bought a 3-bedroom apartment in the city. However, due to a lack of funds for decoration, he had to live in an unfinished house. Even though I lived in the countryside, I continued to work hard to help with the decoration. I raised chickens, ducks, and pigs, and sold them to raise money for the house decoration. The process was longer and more complicated than we expected, and Jian's financial situation was still not completely resolved. With each sale, I sent the money to Jian. hoping that it would ease some of the hardships he was facing. 3 years later, Jin brought home a girlfriend, Lin, for the new year. Lin seemed like a rich young woman from the city, with an air of superiority that made me uncomfortable. The way she looked at me and treated me was distant and dismissive, as if I were an old-fashioned figure who didn't fit into the new life Jin was building. Jin told me that Lin's family was extremely wealthy and that if they got married, we wouldn't have to worry about our financial situation anymore. He seemed convinced that Lin was the solution to all our problems, and this perspective blinded him to the possible consequences of this relationship. I felt a mix of concern and hope as I listened to Jin talk about Lin. On the one hand, I hoped that he would find the happiness and stability he so desperately sought. On the other hand, something about Lin's attitude made me uneasy. I decided to keep my opinions to myself, waiting for time to reveal whether this relationship was really what Jin believed it to be. However, Lin's behavior during the visit deeply bothered me. She insisted on seeing the place where Jin grew up and was visibly uncomfortable with the simplicity of our home and our city. Her observations about country life were full of contempt, and her actions showed that she had no intention of adapting to the environment in which Jin had grown up. Despite this, Jin seemed completely in love with Lin and willing to do anything to keep her happy. He was convinced that Lin was the key to a better future, and that with her by his side, all our difficulties would be overcome. Lin and Jin got married a few months later, and life changed dramatically for all of us. After the wedding, Lin refused to live in the unfinished house and demanded that Jin buy her a house in the city. Jin gave in to Lin's demands and decided to sell the house she had bought with her father's compensation money. The sale was quick, but due to his haste and lack of knowledge of the real estate market, Jin accepted an offer that was much lower than the original purchase price. The amount Jin got for the house was much lower than we had expected, and this was a serious blow to our finances. With the money from the sale, Jin bought a 2-bedroom apartment in the city and used the rest to meet Lin's demands. She wanted a comfortable life with all the luxuries that the big city could offer, and Jin did his best to satisfy her. As a result, the little money that was left from the sale was quickly spent on expensive furniture, designer clothes, and dinners at fancy restaurants. As time went on, Lin began to show her true colors. She refused to visit me, claiming that life in the camp was uncomfortable and unwelcoming. She also insisted that Jin cut ties with her former life, including her own mother. Jin, wanting to maintain peace in his marriage, began to distance himself from me and our family. He visited me less frequently, and the calls became infrequent and brief. When Lin became pregnant, the distance between us grew even wider. Lin saw the pregnancy as a reason to completely avoid any contact with me, claiming that she did not want to expose the baby to the unsanitary conditions of the camp. Jin, concerned for the baby's health, did not argue against her demands. One day, Jin called to inform me that due to financial pressures, he could no longer support me as he had before. He explained that Lin was demanding more money to support the lifestyle she had chosen and that the cost of raising a child was greater than he had imagined. Jin asked me to understand his situation and accepted that he could no longer send money regularly. Hearing this was devastating. I had sacrificed everything for Jin, hoping that he could build a better life for himself and eventually for me as well. But now, all that was left was an overwhelming sense of loss and disappointment. With a heavy heart, I went back to working even harder to support myself. I raised more animals, planted more vegetables, and did what I could to survive. The hardships were many, but I had no other choice. I had to keep going, no matter what. Time passed, and Jin rarely visited me. When he did, the visits were brief and distant. He always seemed to be in a hurry, as if he was fulfilling an obligation rather than wanting to be there. When Lin gave birth to a baby girl, Jian called me to tell me the news. He was excited and full of hope for the future. However, his excitement was not enough to mend the distance between us. He sent me a few pictures of the baby, but he never invited me to visit them in the city. As the years passed, Jian became a stranger to me. Eventually, Jian and Lin moved to an even more upscale neighborhood, where expenses were higher and financial pressure increased. Jian was working hard to support the lifestyle Lin demanded, but it wasn't enough to keep her satisfied. Lin began to complain constantly that Jian wasn't earning enough and that she deserved more than he could provide. Their marriage began to fall apart, and arguments became frequent. One day, I received a call from Jian. He was frantic, telling me that Lin had moved out, taking their daughter with her, and that she was demanding a large sum of money for the divorce. Jian was in a state of utter despair, not knowing what to do. He had sacrificed so much to keep Lin happy, and now she was abandoning him and demanding more than he could give. The pain in Jian's voice was palpable, and my heart broke as I listened to my son suffer so much. It got to the point where Jian had to sell the apartment they were living in to pay the divorce settlement. In the end, he was left with nothing, no money, no family, no home. He returned to the country house where he had grown up, but he was no longer the same. Jian was broken, emotionally and financially. He had lost everything he had worked hard to achieve, and he deeply regretted the choices he had made. Jian's regret was evident in every word, in every gesture. He asked me for forgiveness for abandoning me, for choosing Lin over our family, and for wasting money that could have guaranteed a better future for all of us. I forgave him because I knew there was nothing more that could be done. Time cannot be turned back, and what was lost cannot be recovered. Jian decided that he would try to rebuild his life in the countryside, by my side. He began working on the farm with me, raising animals, planting vegetables, and trying to regain the dignity he had lost. He became a more humble man, more aware of his limitations and the consequences of his actions. Our life became simple again, but there was a sadness that never completely disappeared. The feeling that we could have had a different life, a better life, if things had been done differently, was constantly with us. However, there was no time to regret. We had to continue, as best we could, with what we had left. This is the story of how life tests us in ways we cannot foresee, and how the choices we make have consequences that can haunt us for the rest of our lives. For those who face a similar situation, the lesson that remains is the importance of valuing what really matters and never losing sight of what is essential to our happiness and well-being. Life is full of ups and downs, and what defines our success is not the riches we accumulate, but the relationships we build and the dignity with which we face adversity. Before I close, let me ask you a crucial question. How would you face old age without a solid support network, a guaranteed income, and the certainties that we often take for granted? Life can surprise us in ways we never imagined, and the future can be uncertain. However, with the right approach, we can turn challenges into opportunities and ensure a dignified and serene life. Now, I would like to hear from you. How do you think you could prepare for an uncertain future? Share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. Your perspective can be the key to inspiring and helping others who are going through similar situations. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Wise and Transformative Buddhism to continue receiving life-changing content. Together, we will face the challenges and build a better future. Let's start this conversation right now.